Happy Sunday. Right, let's do seated. Let's start seated. And just settling in, feeling into your body and your breath. Note how the two are interplaying this morning. And how you can consciously kind of impact that exchange of breath and the relationship your breath has with your body as we settle in. Let's give ourselves about 60 more seconds here just to feel in to the interconnection of our breath and our being, physicality of ourselves. And when it feels appropriate, let your eyes open. Receive some light. Let's take our left palm and just turn it down and turn your gaze over towards the right here. So thinking about that left shoulder as you rotate, tucking that back, and then we'll reverse to neutral and right palm comes down. And we give ourselves that same little rotation, thinking about that right shoulder as our emphasis point. And then we'll come back to neutral. We're going to take the right arm and reach that across the sternum, and then the left arm is going to find the elbow, or left hand is going to find the elbow. So we get that little retraction there. We're trying to find that same little pull back at the humeral head. So we pull that back and we're going to gaze over towards the right. And then think about being integrated at the shoulder and compressing the elbow pit towards the sternum, which is a very different sensation than pulling the humeral head out and extending that right arm as far as you can to the left. So elbow pit towards the sternum and integrated at the shoulder capsule. And we'll relax back to neutral and just move the shoulder girdle here. Think about settling and integrating that right shoulder. And then let's Swap. So the left arm reaches across, right hand finds the elbow, and we'll pull or encourage elbow pit towards the sternum as we turn our gaze over towards the left. Experiencing that energetic need, that awareness at the shoulder capsule. Almost a forced integration and retraction at the left humeral head now. When you feel balanced, left to right, let's relax back to neutral. And let's get a little bit of movement in here. So we'll transition to hands and knees tabletop. Just a nice opportunity to use this shoulder integration. So finding your tabletop, take your hands out just a little bit wider than they'd normally be. So maybe that medial edge of the index finger at the lateral edge of the shoulder. And then let's start to sway our hips a little. And as the hips are moving left to right, keep shifting the balance of weight forward into the arms. So you are putting the emphasis, the burden of stability on and in that shoulder capsule, into that humeral head. As you move here, maybe even bringing the torso pretty significantly forward of the wrist crease. And then eventually we'll come back to neutral and let's sink back into child's pose. And as you sink back into child's pose here, we want to feel the shoulder capsule relax. So all that work, all that responsibility that we've put into the shoulder can just be alleviated can be relaxed, and the body can just absorb what you've done thus far. Let's give ourselves 20 more seconds here. Just shoulders coming to ease. We'll slide the hands in front of us if they're not already there. Inhale, pull our way forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, let's grab our blanket or towel. And from a shelf fold, let's go to a hot dog fold. So we end up with that, and we're just going to set that to the side for the moment. Splay the fingers out nice and wide, curl the toes, find neutral in the spine, and find your way into a down dog. So just a down dog that is expansive. Keep in mind you still may have some fatiguey sensations in the shoulder, and that may not allow you to feel full stability as you extend. Make sure stability is your primary focus. And then we'll come down to hands and knees tabletop, and we're going to take this blanket prop and just slide that across the legs so that as you sink back into a child's pose here, you have a forced elevation in the hips. And then we're going to tuck. Tuck is probably the wrong word because it has some awareness around the chin positioning. We're going to keep the cervical spine neutral and plant the forehead here. So there's a little bit more of an angle from the sacrum to the back of the head, a little bit sharper of an angle. And then there's the potential here, depending on where your arms naturally fell, but if you're in a cactus shape, there's the potential here for the sternum to be forward of the shoulders, and then for the shoulders to round in to fall into that anterior collapse. So make sure you're maintaining that integration at the shoulder capsule and that good solid stability there. And then let's add like 5 to 10% core engagement so that we can start to play with that lumbar musculature just a little bit more. And we'll give ourselves just 15 more seconds here. And when you're right, when you're ready, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. We can take that prop out from underneath us and set that to the side for the moment. And let's kick our legs through and we'll find staff. From staff, let's re-engage our blanket and we'll slide that just next to the left hip. And then follow that forward into a fold. So blanket's not getting used right now, but it's going to come up in a moment. Just finding a traditional seated forward fold, something that you can breathe fully into and that you can relax fully into. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll walk our way up to staff. And we're going to bend that left knee so the left kneecap can point towards the ceiling and then let that left knee fall out wide. And we want it to get captured by that prop. And then just turn your torso so the belly button's in the middle of the right thigh and work your way into this single leg forward fold. Unilateral posterior chain expansion. Pretty frequently here, the emphasis is changed from lumbar expansion to more hamstring centric, which is okay. Usually we're pulling out from the hamstring and getting into the lumbar. The only thing that I would say is don't allow the sacrum to tilt. So we want to feel equally grounded on the left and right side of our seat. And as long as that's true, wherever the representation of shortness in the system is manifesting is perfect, is ideal. And then allow your right hand to grab on the toe mound, the ankle, the calf, whatever is accessible for the right hand. And with the left hand, reach back and behind you. So you're opening up this left side of the body and rotating into that and feeling that lateral edge on the left side as you gaze potentially back and behind you. And then that left hand is going to come over the top and it's going to reach straight out where your left foot would be in a forward fold, so that now you have a more symmetrical torso alignment. There's no rotation towards that right hip. And you can feel the expansiveness you've created. And then we'll walk ourselves up to seat. Help the left knee up, extend that left leg down the mat. Take your prop over to the second side, the right side. And once you get your prop situated, with both legs extended, just find a forward fold. And we'll just breathe into this forward fold. And we will eventually walk ourselves back up to staff. Bend the right kneecap points towards the ceiling, right leg falls out wide. It's captured by that blanket space. We rotate so that the belly button is down the middle of the left thigh, and we follow that forward into a fold. So there's this relatively young man. He's gone through university and he spent some time making some money in the poultry industry. And he hasn't been very invested in his schooling, and he hasn't been very invested in his work. And he's feeling relatively detached from the expectations of society. His father was a doctor, and his father is very upset that he has not taken that same path into the medical field. When it's appropriate, left hand's going to become your anchor. So toe mound, ankle, calf, whatever feels appropriate. Right hand reaches and extends behind you. You rotate and open that right side, wanting to feel that lateral chain. So keeping that anchor at the base around the sacrum as you reach and extend back, maybe even gazing back towards the right hand. And then when that feels appropriate, when you feel balanced, right hand reaches up and over, and it extends out as if the right leg was there. And you get this very symmetrical forward fold with an asymmetrical leg alignment. Really feeling into the space and the depth that you have available in this fold. And eventually, when it's appropriate, let's walk. Up towards staff, we'll extend the right leg down the mat. And let's take our prop, go return to shelf fold. And from shelf fold, we're going to add like a quarter fold so that you get a little bit of extra density at the top. And that's just from the fold over. And then a nice shelf with a little bit of lift. That's going to come behind us. Our head is headed towards that extra shelf. So as we lay down, just make sure that your prop offers that back of the head support. And then you have that shelf underneath the scapula. And we'll just allow our arms to fall wherever is natural. And then think about relaxing into the upper back and into the shoulders. And so this young man, one day, feeling detached, feeling lost, feeling the pressure of not doing what his parents had hoped of him, goes out one day on his motorcycle, his only mode of transportation. And there's this very popular mountain. We wouldn't necessarily think of it as a mountain. It's kind of like a sloping hill where young people have for centuries just gone and gathered and hung out together. And he's headed up to kind of this area and he decides to pull off the road halfway up. And he sits down, he finds this nice flat stone, he sits down, and he's just surrounded by the sounds of nature and the calmness of the environment in which he chose to settle. And he closes his eyes. For what feels like 30 seconds. When he opens his eyes, it's very clear that a large amount of time has passed. It's the middle of the night. We'll give ourselves about 60 more seconds here, just feeling our back against the mat. Feeling how your breath is interplaying with your physicality in the same way we felt into that experience when we started class seated. So your next inhale, we'll bring our knees into a bent position if they're not already there. We'll gently slide that prop out from underneath us and just set it to the side. And then let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. This will be a relatively quick transition here, just checking on the medial line capacity. And we'll inhale, bring our knees back to neutral, kneecaps point towards the ceiling. Extend your legs down the mat. And let's roll straight over onto our bellies. And before you get too settled in, let's bring our blanket back into a hot dog fold. So from shelf fold, long ways. And we will slide that blanket right down next to our right hip. If you have some hip limitations, you may want to slide this a little lower towards the knee. If you have a lot of freedom of hip movement, you may want to slide it a little higher. So we're headed towards half frog. We're going to take that right knee out and then stack the hands so that you can have a crocodile-esque support for the forehead. But you can also rotate the head so that your right ear comes down facing towards the left, or so that the left ear comes down facing towards the right, depending on what feels most appropriate for you. And then once we get the kind of general alignment down, start to think about how the hips are settling into the shape. What compensation is being made by the lumbar to correct the asymmetry of the right hip, and see if you can use the glutes instead of the low back to bring the body back into balance. Sometimes that will require actually engaging the glutes enough to lift the pelvis until you can find a level place, but find that neutral alignment across the hip girdle so that you can relax into this half frog. And so this young man is pretty confused about what's happened on this rock he chose to sit down on. He eventually gets up, collects himself, gets on his motorcycle, drives home. And over the course of the next few weeks, this phenomena starts to happen to him more and more. This phenomena in which he closes his eyes and large swaths of time pass by. And he becomes more and more interested in what's happening. And he starts to realize as he's doing this, he's feeling calmer. He's not worrying. And the more he digs into this experience, the more he realizes what is going on within him is this profound transformation through meditation that he more or less accidentally discovered. And it is within that realization that he now has the capacity to meditate simply by closing his eyes, that he makes this bold decision. He is going to teach meditation to the world. And in 5 years, through this process, he's going to enlighten the planet. He's going to bring world peace. He's going to solve hunger. He's going to end cruelty. And so he sets off on this mission. Last 30 seconds here on this first side. when you feel right leg extends down the mat. We can press ourselves up more towards Sphinx. We're going to make our way to Sphinx, so you may want to use that positioning to just take your prop over to the second side, the left side. But then we're going to head back down to Crocodile and pause there enough to fully engage the glutes and fully balance the hip placement. Then with the glutes still engaged, we're going to lift ourselves up into Sphinx. So it's a pretty different setup. Palms down. I mean, it's the same shape, but we are, instead of setting the shape and then setting the positioning, we're locking in the hips and getting the torso to kind of follow that. You may need to lower your torso more than you normally do because of the glute engagement. And again, it's just because we set this shape up backwards of how we normally do it, but use that glute positioning as the regulator instead of the torso as the regulator, and then compensating from there. And we're just going to give ourselves 20 more seconds here. So just 20 more seconds to maintain that glute engagement. And we'll relax. Crocodile, left knee comes out to half frog. Note that this side may be different, and you should adjust the positioning of the prop and the positioning of your torso to accommodate that difference. And then bring in our hip balance, our glute engagement, our stability. And so this young man, with this huge, audacious 5-year goal, sets out on his motorcycle. And he starts going essentially door to door. He is building a list of people that he can connect with, and he can utilize their homes to start to share this teaching method. And so he starts building a network of homes that he can teach within across India. And he puts on hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles on his motorcycle, traversing India. And he starts teaching people to meditate 1 or 2, 3 people at a time. And then 5 or 6 people at a time. And then 7 or 8 people at a time. And these houses start to get crowded. 10 or 12 people at a time, 20 to 15, 15 to 20 people at a time. And the houses start to become too small for him to teach within. And we'll give ourselves about 40 more seconds here on this second side. When it feels appropriate for you, left leg extends down to mirror the right. We'll squeeze the glutes to balance the hip placement and then lift ourselves up into our Sphinx alignment, keeping in mind that the glute engagement may be creating a limiting factor in the lumbar, even into that lumbar thoracic union. And we will respond to that without softening the glute engagement, but instead by adjusting the torso height. And then relax, stack your hands, and find your way into crocodile. And we really want, it's harder to create neutrality when we are laying prone, right? So as you are here, think about relaxing and maintaining as much neutrality as you can. We are very quickly going to flip over and create neutrality with the stability of the floor beneath us. And in fact, when you're ready, let's do that. Let's roll straight over. If that prop's still in your way, move that. And then let's get onto our back so that we can just settle here. Knees can be bent, legs can be extended. Any shape that feels like it is allowing your torso to relax is perfect. And so as these houses become too small a place for him to teach, he starts raising funds to build a center. Eventually, he acquires this property and he builds this beautiful temple. And he starts to teach hundreds of people at a time this practice of meditation. And he's constantly inundated with people sharing their experiences of enlightenment. And thanking him for the life-changing tools that he shared with them. And eventually he starts traveling outside of India and around the world teaching this practice. We'll give ourselves 60 more seconds here. And we'll inhale and we'll bend our knees so both kneecaps can point towards the ceiling if they're not already there. And then let's start to add a little lateral sway. just exploring that rotational capacity of the lumbar, the integrational capacity of the hips, or the upper and lower abs of the body. And eventually, this guru is drawing thousands and thousands of people to his teachings. And he's holding these big, giant events around the world. And these even bigger events inside India. Where he's drawing tens of thousands of people and sharing these teachings. Next time the knees fall over to the left, let's let them settle there. And eventually he's opening up temples in other countries around the world. And then he's able to draw tens of thousands of people to events. In other countries outside of India. And then even the tens of thousands of people who are showing up at events aren't big enough. And he starts sharing his teachings online. And so he can start to teach hundreds of thousands of people at once. And he's starting to expand his reach beyond meditation, beyond enlightening people. And he starts working on restoring natural environments and teaching people how to be economically free. And he's impacting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people each year. When it feels right for you, as it feels right, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. And then we'll exhale, let the knees fall over to the second side. And so, with all of this impact, with all of this reach, with all of this capacity, obviously, he starts to gain more and more and more media attention. And he does this huge interview on network TV in America. And he goes through the interview and they kind of ask him, questions about the start. and how he got his start because he sat down on this rock one day, closed his eyes, and somehow found his way into meditation. And then he started traveling India by motorcycle, teaching groups of 1 to 2 people until he was teaching housefuls of people. And then the houses became too small, and he built his own facility and his temple, and he started teaching hundreds of people, and then it became thousands of people, and then it's now hundreds of thousands of people at once. And they put together this piece, and the interviewer is just absolutely mesmerized by every single detail. And the interviewer is aware of all of this global impact and all this positive and all this good that has come from this one being. We'll give ourselves 60 more seconds here on this second side. When you're ready, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. We'll let our eyes close and ask ourselves if there's anything that we might want, need, or benefit from prior to Shavasana. And if there is, we'll offer that. And if we're ready for some stillness, if we're ready to settle in, we'll allow that. So the interview ends. The lights are getting broken down and the mics are getting taken apart. And the interviewer turns to this guru and he says, I've spoken to so many people across my career. And I have to say, your story is one of the most engaging stories I've ever heard of. It's one of the most incredible success stories that I can think of. And he starts to laugh. And she's just kind of staring at him blankly. And she says, "What's so funny?" And he says, "Well, didn't you hear the part where I said I had a plan in 5 years to transform the world, to enlighten humans, to create world peace? I'm one of the biggest failures of all time." Now we'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes. Into our wrists and our ankles. Into our elbows and our knees. Our hips, shoulders, neck and head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, we'll allow the entirety of the body to start to move and explore the space around us, and we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. From the seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes closed. And we'll inhale our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you allow yourself the opportunity to stop wasting time chasing things you know you can obtain and start reaching for the things that seem impossible, and see how that changes your experience? Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Love the heck out of you. I'll be back tomorrow night to move. If I don't see you then, I will be back next week. Have a beautiful day or week, and I love you. Mwah.